JoJo as a series is no stranger to unsettling, disturbing villains with equally terrifying abilities. However, in my opinion, there is one that takes these factors to an incredibly effective extreme, both in his character and especially in his stand, due to how these ideas are completely and utterly integrated with both the origin and the execution of that stand and person. If I could choose two words to describe Golden Wind's main villain and Pasiones boss Diavolo, it would be mysterious and intimidating. Nothing about him makes sense, everything is contradictory and unclear, and the only absolute truth to him is that he is powerful and unsettling. His motives are grand and megalomaniacally ambitious, as he wishes to stand at the apex of all hierarchies and rule from above, while obsessively craving to be free of both his past and any and all identity. And all of this is perfectly reflected and expanded upon in his terrifying stand, King Crimson. A disturbingly tall, imposing humanoid stand, King Crimson appears as a royally red, muscular figure covered in white webbing and separate bits of armor. Its constantly distorted face, and the fact that it has two of them, make him a consistently disturbing image. It doesn't help either that it is among the physically strongest stands in the series, being able to punch through an adult human body with neglectable ease. Overall, the mere presence of this stand is enough to inspire anxiety and terror with the pressure it exudes. This gets dialed up to 11 once we begin considering the actual ability of King Crimson. It has the rather terrifying power to erase time. Now, I know what you're thinking.
He erases time, but what does that mean?
As much as its confusing ability has become a meme, King Crimson's power is actually not all that complicated. King Crimson works by first using his second face, Epitaph, to look 10 seconds into the future. If he sees something that is unpleasant to him or that he would like to avoid, Diavolo activates King Crimson's Time Erasure. Once activated, it puts everyone affected into a sort of trance, in which they can only do what King Crimson foresaw, so they're technically being tied to that fate. Only Diavolo is able to act of his own accord. After 10 seconds, the ability ends and no one besides Diavolo remembers what occurred in the erased time. To them, it's as if time skipped or was erased. However, while the actions you took during the erased time have vanished from your memory, the results are still present. So, for example, let's say you want to punch Diavolo in the face. He looks into the future and sees that and thinks, nah, I don't like this. So he activates King Crimson. You lose control and consciousness over your actions and are locked into your punch, while Diavolo can freely move around. After 10 seconds, the ability ends and Diavolo has dodged. From your perspective, you raised your fist towards the man standing before you one moment, only for your arm to already be stretched out and the man gone in the next moment. It's as if you suddenly skipped forward. So, in essence, King Crimson's main ability is incredibly broken. But even more so than that, it is terrifying because it messes with two fundamental aspects of our relationship with reality: time and our agency and control over our actions. It strips us of our conscious ability to act and condemns us to follow our fate blindly, which is incredibly effective at making us and the characters feel helpless, since lack of control is one of the things that will frighten humans the most. Additionally, while messing with time is by no means a new concept within the JoJo-verse, stopping time and rewinding time are somewhat straightforward to understand. But erasing time? The fact that it's so confusing among a lot of the internet community is proof that this has some sort of different effect on the mind trying to understand it. That is, at the very least, an incredibly abstract idea, and it's this bizarre abstraction that makes even just the principle of this power unsettling and intimidating. Not to mention that this is just King Crimson's base ability seen within the series. A huge aspect of Part 5's second half is the desperate race to the stand arrow, which, if in Diavolo's hands, would allow him to hypothetically evolve his stand even further into the possibly monstrous and most likely invincible King Crimson Requiem. So already we have an insanely strong package. But this gets even further enhanced once we consider the origins and ideas behind King Crimson, and for that we need to look at his name. Like most stands in the series, King Crimson gets its name from a musical reference, specifically the British progressive rock band King Crimson. Their debut album, In the Court of the Crimson King, is generally considered a milestone of progressive rock, and it is this album that is generally attributed to be the stand's main origin. While the many songs on the album have various different elements Araki referenced most likely, I would like to focus on the two that are the most relevant and the most influential ones on King Crimson and Diavolo. These two being Epitaph and In the Court of the Crimson King. Let's start with Epitaph. This song works as a sort of prophecy in regards to what will happen if Diavolo reaches his goal of absolute power and dominance through the arrow. This section in particular describes how Diavolo's instrument of death, namely King Crimson's union with the arrow, would affect the world. Every man is torn apart and silence drowns the screams. Additionally, the line "with nightmares and with dreams" could be related to Diavolo's obsessive delusion of grandeur and immortality, as it isn't unlike a dream state. His mindset and ideals are further referenced in this line. The Iron Gates of Fate are clear references to Diavolo's belief that fate is predetermined, specifically that his everlasting victory is already imprinted onto the very fabric of destiny. This idea is also enhanced by the lines, "as it has already been sown," and is therefore destined to blossom as predicted. But by far the strongest link to Diavolo is found in the song's chorus. An epitaph being the inscription on a person's grave, these lines accentuate that Diavolo's legacy to the world will only be confusion and a broken path, as in him attaining King Crimson Requiem and ruling over the world as he plans to will only lead to destruction and despair, a world in which surviving would be a stroke of luck, worthy of laughter and celebration. But before that, the horrors of Diavolo's reign and the tears and the pain that brings along must be endured. Essentially, Epitaph establishes what's at stake throughout Part 5 and what the world is in for if Diavolo wins. The second song, In the Court of the Crimson King, meanwhile, details his current reign and his use of his stand, King Crimson. This track works as a detailed description of the court and reign of a figure called the Crimson King. The title Crimson King pops up all throughout history, specifically the Middle Ages, and is a nickname often used to refer to monarchs who caused a lot of bloodshed and cruelty. So immediately there is already a strong connection to the stand King Crimson, as its reign over time and its more homageful reign over other stands due to its dominance and power causes much pain, suffering and bloodshed as well. As we get into the lyrics, the song greets us with this. The song's meticulous description of the various activities within the court give it a cluttered feeling, almost as if it were a circus or an amusement park. Tournaments, choirs, pipers. These are all there on the whim of the Crimson King, there to entertain. This connects to how Diavolo uses his King Crimson to hold Italy and Mafia in the palm of his hand. Everything the gang, the country and its people do is at Diavolo's permission and whim. Additionally, the song wastes no time giving all its characters associated colors, the Crimson King, the Purple Piper. This is quite clearly a nod to Diavolo's many henchmen and gang affiliations, whom he allows to go about their business and entertain him. However, the moment they step out of line, they themselves are subject to the wrath of the Crimson King. As the next verse starts, the song talks of putting shutters on dreams, which is evocative of how Diavolo and King Crimson decide who gets to pursue their dreams and live, and who gets both their life and their dreams snuffed out. We get another color character, the Black Queen, who attempts to summon the Fire Witch. Now, we don't have time to get into this properly, at least not today, but the entirety of this album has been interpreted to have themes pertaining to the Cold War. This is something you can look up in other interpretations, and it is very commonly seen as the main goal of that album. and most of those interpretations agree that the Fire Witch is meant to represent the nuke, the atomic bomb. So, in essence, this line speaks of the pursuit of an ultimate, devastating power by the court to further selfish desires. And that is very similar to how Diavolo uses his power and influence to not only brutally defend his throne, but also to pursue the arrow to summon, or rather create, his own nuke, his own ultimate weapon, King Crimson Requiem. The rest of the song mentions how Diavolo pulls the strings from behind and how he lets puppets dance, emphasizing the previously established ideas of dominance and control from the background. However, one line here sticks out to me. The term the grinding wheel has many possible meanings depending on the angle we take, but 3 of them are pretty dominant and pretty pervasive. The wheel could be seen as the wheel of life, turning and advancing as life does. Or it could refer to the wheel of time, or, and most fittingly for our purposes in pertaining to King Crimson, it might refer to the wheel of fate. Overall, the third option seems to fit best for our interpretation purposes, especially considering that the anime even went as far as to represent fate as a wooden grinding wheel in its latest episode. Regardless, this line implies 2 things. That whatever this wheel is, it turns and turns, slowly, exhaustingly, over and over. But it does so within the court of the Crimson King, meaning that it, too, only continues to turn due to his will and at his discretion. This again speaks to the absolute control and power that Diavolo and his stand emit over everyone in Vento Aureo. As you can see, the terrifying and overwhelming dominance of both King Crimson and its user are deeply rooted in their cultural origins and are obviously figures that Araki designed very meticulously. And while I know not everyone will have all of these interpretations present when watching or reading, the fact that there is this well of background to them gives most of Araki's characters and their stands a very strong sense of depth and identity. And I think that nowhere is this better seen than in King Crimson, a being that emits royal terror and absolute dominance with its every action. I want to end this video with one final bit of context. As I said earlier, the title Crimson King was often given to medieval sovereigns who showed exceptional cruelty, bloodshed, and malice. However, there are 2 additional interpretations of that title I neglected to mention. One is that it could refer to Acer Platonoides, a Japanese variant of a Norwegian maple tree that is quite commonly referred to as the Crimson King. It is often considered to be a symbol of the unconscious, which could feed into how King Crimson's ability makes you essentially unconscious to the erased time and forces you to simply proceed with the actions fate ordained for you. Or it could be just another homage to the dreamlike, almost unconscious state Diavolo finds himself in when thinking about himself and the world around him, thinking that he's immortal and the emperor who rules over everyone. And the third interpretation is that the Crimson King is actually just one of many names for the same being, a being known as Beelzebub, or Mephistopheles, or Lucifer, in short, the devil, which would make King Crimson a stand-in and a homage to the devil. A devil that resides in Italy. And do you know what the Italian word for the devil is? Diavolo. Thanks for watching and take care.